Welcome to the channel of the most disturbing horror stories, all of which have actually happened. Subscribe now to immerse yourself in the shadows of reality. It was the 90s and one evening I was driving my faithful truck, a slightly run-down but reliable Iveco. I was traveling along the road that connects Milan to Naples. It was a journey that I had done countless times, but each time it had its own peculiar realities, especially traveling at night, when the world seems like another place. The cabin of my truck was a small personal refuge, adorned with photos yellowed by time, coffee cups stolen as trophies from various autogrills and a radio that crackled hits. In those years I was alone on the road, with the load of fresh fruit and vegetables that I had to deliver at dawn to Naples, to ensure that the markets had fresh products for the day. Everything was going as usual, until he heard the engine make a worrying noise. A metallic noise that didn't bode well. I decided to stop, not without some blasphemy, aware that any failure would have meant delays and complications. Stepping out of the truck, the cold night air hit me immediately, reminding me that I was alone on a dark street far from any help. While I was inspecting the engine trying to locate the cause of the problem, a dull noise caught my attention. It felt like something had hit the side of the truck. Initially, I thought of an animal, perhaps a wild boar, since it was not uncommon to meet them in those areas. But when the noise persisted, curiosity took over. Cautiously, armed only with a flashlight, I approached the source of the noise. My heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to expect, but I certainly wasn't prepared for what I found there under the truck. A motionless, pale human hand protruded. In the light of the torch my blood froze in my veins. For an instant panic took over. My mind reminded me of all the crime stories I had heard, stories of disappeared people and solved crimes that dotted the news of the 90s. But then reason took over. There had to be a logical explanation, something concrete and real behind that macabre discovery. I forced myself to take a deep breath and examine the situation better. The hand didn't seem to be attached to anything. There was no trace of body or blood, just that hand abandoned there as if it had been put under my truck by someone or something. With my mind still clouded by shock, I began to look around for clues that could explain the presence of that hand. It was then that I noticed a few meters away, tire tracks on the road and signs of sudden braking that ended right near where I had found the hand. The most logical explanation began to take shape in my mind: an accident, perhaps an act of violence or an illicit transport gone wrong. Something that had forced someone to hastily dispose of that evidence, taking advantage of the darkness of the night, and I had ended up there by chance, an involuntary witness to a mystery that perhaps would never find a solution. There was no time to waste. My cargo needed to get to its destination. With a mixture of reluctance and haste, he covered his hand with some old rags I kept in the truck, promising to notify the authorities as soon as possible. The rest of the trip passed in uneasy silence, my mind constantly returning to that discovery and all the possible explanations. Once in Naples, after having delivered the load, I made my report telling the agents what I had found. I never knew what happened next, if that hand was ever identified or if the mystery behind its presence was solved. That night remained etched in my memory, an indelible reminder of the dangers and mysteries that can hide in the darkness of the roads that we truckers travel every day. By trade I'm a truck driver, one of those you never see in the office but always around with my ass on a seat that has taken the shape of my body after years on the road. I drive a beast that has more kilometers than a long-distance train, and despite a few ailments here and there, it goes like a train. My world is made up of motorways, toll booths and auto grills that I know better than my own home. The story I'm about to tell you happened a couple of years ago, on one of those evenings when you'd rather be at home in front of the TV with a beer in your hand than find yourself in the middle of a storm on some godforsaken highway. I left Turin for Rome, with a load of furniture that costs more than my house. I already knew it was going to be a long night, but I had no idea what awaited me. The sky was black as pitch, and it wasn't long before the first droplets as big as peanuts started to fall. Perfect, I thought, just what I needed. Not that driving in the rain scared me, but I knew it would make my journey even slower and more boring. I was somewhere between Florence and Rome with the water coming down in buckets, when my old traveling companion decided it was time to make pizzas. There was a strange noise from the engine, a sort of sharp bang and then nothing, dead silence. Fuck you, it wasn't the first time it happened to me in the middle of nowhere, but usually I had an ace up my sleeve, a trick to restart the engine or at least get to the next autogrill. But that night nothing. The old man showed no signs of life. I had to pick up the phone to call for assistance, praying that the signal held. Hi, I'm a truck driver stuck in the middle of the apocalypse. I need help, otherwise this goods won't reach destination on its own. The wait was long with the water still pounding on the roof of the cabin as if it wanted to break through. Every now and then I tried to restart the engine hoping for a miracle, but the only response was a sad click. I took out my flashlight, put on my raincoat which smells more like mold than fabric, and I went down to have a look, and while I was there cursing the engine as if it could answer me, I heard something, the sound of footsteps on the wet gravel. I turned around with the flashlight pointed in front of me, but there was nothing, just the night and the rain. I started working again, trying to ignore the shiver that ran down my spine. Then I heard that noise again. Steps close, too close. I raised the flashlight and what I saw made my blood run cold. A figure of a man perhaps standing there looking at me. I couldn't see his face, he was covered by something, a hood perhaps, but the most disturbing thing was his hands. They were too long with fingers that looked like dry branches. I didn't say a word, I didn't have time. That man started moving towards me slowly, as if every step was calculated. I did the only sensible thing, I ran to take refuge in the truck, locking the doors and hoping for a miraculous departure. The engine responded on the first try as if it was just waiting for that moment to show me it was on my side. I turned the key and the old man came back to life, taking me away from that nightmare figure that I had now lost sight of in the rearview mirror. I didn't stop until I reached the first service area with the first light of dawn keeping me company. I checked the cargo, expecting to find something horrible hidden among the crates, but everything was fine, just furniture, no monsters or ghostly figures. I don't know who or what that figure on the road at night was, a madman, a lost soul, or maybe just the product of my tiredness and tension from the journey, but one thing is certain, that race against the night, that fear that made me my heart pounding, it was the most terrifying delivery of my life. Since then, every time the rain starts hitting the windshield, I can't help but look back, wondering if there's still something waiting out there in the night. My name is Frank, and for more than 20 years, I have been making a living traveling the world behind the wheel of my truck. It's not a job for everyone. It requires sacrifice, resistance, and above all the ability to be alone for a long time, but for me it has always been more than a simple job. It's my passion, my freedom. My traveling companion is an impressive and reliable Volvo FH, with which I have shared more roads than I can count. The story I'm about to tell you happened a couple of years ago, on one of those nights that seemed to be created specifically to make the unforeseeable happen. I had to transport a particularly precious load, a batch of latest generation electronic devices, destined for a large retailer. It was a job that required discretion and above all impeccable safety. I left Tennessee late in the evening, aiming to reach Canada. Before 2 at the latest, 2:30 in the morning, the journey began without a hitch, with the highway almost deserted and my truck advancing powerfully under the starry sky. I had done the Tennessee-Canada route hundreds of times and I knew every curve, every climb, but that night something was different. The air was electric, charged with a tension that I couldn't explain. A premonition that made me instinctively grip the steering wheel in my hands when I passed Minneapolis was when an unusual dense and impenetrable fog began to form, which drastically reduced visibility. I slowed down, turned on the fog lights and walked carefully into the white fog. That's when the real nightmare began. Suddenly, a black van without license plates emerged from the side of the road, positioned itself behind me and began to follow me at close range. My first reaction was annoyance. I thought of simple thugs who enjoyed scaring truck drivers at night. But when a second van appeared, alongside me and forcing me to slow down further, he understood that the situation was much more serious than a simple joke in bad taste. The vans locked me in a vice, forcing me to stop before I could fully realize what was happening. Four hooded, armed figures operated out of nowhere, surrounding the truck. My heart was beating wildly, my mind was racing to desperately look for a way out that I knew didn't exist. One of the robbers, a man of imposing size and with an authoritative voice, knocked on the window with the butt of a gun. "Get out without making a story," he said in a tone that doesn't allow for a reply. His presence was overwhelming, and although I couldn't see his face under the hood, his eyes shone with a coldness that made my blood run cold. Aware that resisting would only make things worse, he opened the door and got out with his hands raised in surrender. The robbers took me away from the truck, while two of them got into the cab and started the engine. The man who had forced me down held me at gunpoint with his gun, fixing me with a look that was beyond his intent. There was something personal about it, almost as if that robbery was just part of a larger plan. Within minutes, my truck and the robbers disappeared into the fog, leaving me alone with no cell phone or way to call for help. It was only thanks to a passing motorist, who picked me up and took me to the nearest petrol station, that he managed to raise the alarm. The police arrived quickly, but there was already no sign of the robbers and my truck. The investigation was long and complicated, but ultimately led to the arrest of the gang responsible for a series of similar robberies all along the highway. However, the man who had spoken to me that night was never found. As if he had vanished into thin air, leaving me with the weight of his words and the memory of a look that even today, in the darkest and quietest nights, makes my blood freeze in my veins when I walk the streets. That robbery forever changed the way I saw the streets of the night. Each trip has become a testament to caution, a constant reminder that no matter how confident you feel, there's always something out there that can surprise you. Even though I continue to do this job because it is what I love and it is what I was made for, I have never forgotten that night or the man who with just a few words engraved such deep terror in my heart.